Hey everyone, Valentine's Day is just around the corner, and I hope you all get to celebrate it with someone special, whether it's with your partner, a friend, or just some time for yourself. I hope it's filled with love, happiness. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell for future updates. One day, I bumped into Emily in the office. Valentine's Day appeared to be a good reason for me to create a genuine surprise. After dating for half a year, I thought I would make this event special. I handed her a bouquet. An evening walk was planned at Grant Park. Winter had finished, and the park was full of colors. Even though the number of couples walking around was innumerable, the surrounding atmosphere was calm and peaceful. I was on the bank enjoying the lights around me. The two of us had a deep and unique conversation that involved a lot of different topics: our future travel plans, restaurants, and pets. The atmosphere was like a dream, and the lake sparkled with light from the city. So far, everything was perfect, and the timing was appropriate. There were not too many people in the park. It could have been that it was Valentine's Day that led to the fewer people. A few couples were jogging or strolling. I kept remembering the enjoyable moments Emily and I had together. I said, "How about getting a dog? We used to take it for a walk in a funny way. In the evening, we used to cuddle and watch movies or read books." Two hoodie-wearing boys passed us by. I didn't notice them, but I was glad to see them headed somewhere. Emily squeezed my hand. I glanced back as they were approaching us. My heart sank with anxiety. They could be residents of the neighborhood. It didn't take my mind long to warn me that something was wrong. I realized Emily was apprehensive as she held my hand. I prayed it wouldn't be that conspicuous. There were no people around. Only street lamps flickered, cast eerie shadows. I regretted taking the route through the park. Suddenly, one guy blocked our path. It was likely he was going to rob me. The guy spoke with a tired voice. "Give me your wallet." One man stood aside. I saw the knife shone in the dim light. I swept my hands up, then stirred out my wallet peaceful. Emily was terrified, trembling slightly in silence. In a soft voice, I said, "We want no trouble." The knife man came closer, looking Emily narrowly. My skin enraged. The first said, "Hurry." I confidently passed over my wallet. I hoped they'd just leave us alone. The man tucked it away, and then they started the bad magic. They had what they wanted, and were still frightened us. The guy without the knife had smiled, asked, "What else is in there?" I pulled Emily next to me. My heart thumped so hard. "Nothing," was the gruff answer. I rushed out. Instantly, the knife guy hissed threateningly, then stabbed my stomach, felt knives cutting with fire that spread all around inside me. I fell apart, clutching my belly as warmth spread under my fingers. Emily screamed. "Please no," she cried with her broke voice. I saw them dragging Emily away. Away, she fought against it with kicks and twists, but he was stronger. The pain was huge as the guy kicked my ribs and I could not hold the air. A dull sound was ringing inside my head as it hit the ground. My body shouted out loud because I could not move. Emily's voice was getting louder. "Let Jason go." I could not protect her. Another kick on the head made white light burst suddenly behind my eyes. The last sounds I heard before it was all black was Emily sobbing. When I came to myself, I was looking at the night sky which was above me. My body was so heavy my arms and legs could not move. Every part of the body hurt. My ribs, my stomach, my head. I blinked my eyes, trying to see Emily was there next to me, curled up shaking. Her dress was torn and she had her arms hugging herself tightly. When she saw that I moved, she crawled to me closer. Her face was covered with tears. "Jason," she said in a weak voice. I thought she was choked on her words. Distant sirens were in the silence, and red and blue lights were flashing through trees. Someone called the help. After hearing the noise, a shadow came near us. It was a cop. While I was lying on the ground, I felt somebody bending down over me. So many voices filled the background that some I was not familiar with. Someone was applying pressure on my sore spot, which hurt really bad. Emily's hand seemed like it was glued to mine with tears flowing down her cheeks. The only thing I could do was beg her with my eyes because I could never say anything. I later spent the next 3 hours with an ambulance door in the hospital and the ceiling above me in a wheelchair. I smelled the fresh smell of antiseptics and wanted to use it as the scent on my new one. They moved me into a blue and beige bed that has an IV pole. When dawn came, Emily sat by my side, but it was like a stone and quiet. There was no interchange. The police had interviewed us, but the culprit seemed to be untraceable. That night brought many changes, which certainly didn't make it easy for me. Now for me, Valentine's Day is mainly a notice of pain where I lost my soul. I cannot call it a day of love anymore. Instead, it takes me back to the awful day of my attack. The lights of the tools, Emily's outburst, and the moment the knife was inserted inside me are all firmly lodged in my mind. I am in sorrow that I do not know how to relieve myself of. In the past, my neighbors had just peaceful lives. Every joyful event at Sarah's always got interrupted, and she could not relish the minutest of moments. She would be the happiest when there would be a joke to accompany. I really liked her because she was just herself. Everybody around her was likewise in the necessary mood. One evening I said something which very much touched the heart of life in my house while I sat down for my meal. I uncorked my heart to Sarah, revealing my love for a married man. This was better than I ever dreamed it would be. It was my turn finally to let her in on this private affair. She learnt that I loved Michael, a married man, from me. The age difference of 15 years gave him a mature, hoary side, whereas I could see him as not being one among others. An individual can be seen controlling Leslie, but he was certainly not her boss. He knew what to say to her to get her to respond favorably. When the matter approached a situation which I fled like a coward, I said it was not the best idea. However, Leslie saw it there was more to it. He showed affection and thoughtfulness. He was not like other men. He did care about her, just that he required more time. He was married, but that marriage was done and dusted. He told her things would be different at the end of the road. I would never trust that dude. But Leslie was happy. I was aware she was over-optimistic. I was also aware that my advice would not change her mind, but I listened to her excuses. I had no right to lord it over anybody. It became a trap for her to meet him in hotel rooms or cars in the following months. His reasons were flimsy. On some days, we would drink cheap wine at my place, and she would present him to the world as though he was a god. He was to leave her someday, but he needed to get things correctly first. I felt otherwise, but Leslie was expecting this to happen soon, and I was the one who wanted to be her only option. At present, there was nothing wrong, yet Leslie was very anxious about the situation. Then, one night she came with the news of shock. I am expecting a baby. I just sat staring at her in disbelief. It was not a joke, but the father was Michael. I could not get a single thought out of myself for a long time. She had always been so careful. She was on a warpath. I wanted her to come out with it, whether she had taken a test or not. Yes, she said. She was scared stiff of the idea that Michael would toss her aside. I told her to quit reacting that way. He will not stop loving you, which was my argument. Michael has the highest regard for life on earth. He is the one that hears this piece of news, and the one who would be changed by it all. But she sounded as if all her thoughts were just about telling him. The words she used brought it all together. It had to be done. He had to be told. My impression of her thoughts was tender. The whole situation seemed like the creation of a film student. This was going to change a lot of things. I had affection for her and warned her to be careful. The following day, I was disappointed to hear that she did not get in touch with me. It was not usual for her to not contact me. Worry has not been a part of my thoughts. Nevertheless, at a certain point, I began to feel anxious as time passed, and I could not get in touch with her. My text message was not answered at all. She answered my call but could not take it. On social media, I tried to ask about her but did not receive any answers. The fact that she has not logged onto the internet since yesterday made me uneasy. Thus, I decided to check the hospitals, calling them and reporting that I had a missing relative. The people at the hospitals did not know of anyone matching. The police were unable to file a missing persons report until 24 hours had passed. I spent time rolling in my bed, feeling so bad. I really had difficulties in sleeping because of the weight I felt in my stomach. The police then called me on the following day. They informed me they had found Leslie's dead body lying in a car behind an old motel outside the city. The investigation did not indicate any disturbance, and she was laid back, all the way in the passenger seat. Her body was completely covered by leaves. A lot happened that night, but no one could explain what was going on. That was not an accident. In the evening, the police went to my house, and I informed them that Michael was with his girlfriend. They were both in love, and she became pregnant. After that, Leslie mysteriously disappeared. Eventually, the cops charged Michael as the main suspect. The video footage from the motel was reviewed, and it showed Michael coming in and going out in less than an hour. When the cops phoned, he could not be reached. They found him at the airport 2 days later, but he did not provide any explanation during the interrogation. During the police interrogation, the truth was revealed. Michael was filled with panic because he was afraid that this would ruin his marriage. Earlier, he had an argument with Leslie. Leslie had told him to either leave his wife or be honest about their relationship. He just couldn't choose such a thing. Therefore, they met at the motel, and voices were raised at first, but later the arguments were physical. Michael injured Leslie with a knife and left her bleeding on the floor. He thought he could escape from it, and eventually, his life wouldn't be the same. He was arrested for life. His wife served him with divorce papers that he didn't care about. Dad said that I should not tell you, but you need to know. He was reasonable, but he wrongly thought of my aunt as being the one to blame. She is no more. I think of her very often. Even when she was in sorrow, she was in happiness. If I could stop her from the man or had an opportunity to get to know her before, the outcome would have been different. Another couple named Chris and Anthony were just one among many couples that were perfect. They were the best hosts. The neighbors thought them the best couple who would get married. She wore rings with 2 initials and flowers. When you turned it, you saw the couple dance. There were also lovebirds that show they liked one another. It was late October last year. She had an engagement ring, and she was definitely over the moon. But they had no eye contact, nor did they talk to each other anymore. Yeah, I said to myself, those rumors have some truth in them. When I took out the rubbish, I noticed Bethany, who had been outside for some time and was staring at her yard. I did not go astray on the path of the ordinary I presented. I had been on the right path in class, and you could not turn back except for the whole year. She didn't respond at all. I thought she was not entertaining. But then we became buddies. It was the reason she shared some ideas with me. We were there, in fact, helping each other. The information that she relayed about the weather or her garden remained unchanged. She only nodded and smiled weakly before escorting me in. One early morning in mid-January, I surprisingly stumbled upon her just after dawn. There she stood, her hand stretched towards their mailbox, holding an envelope and staring at it. The wind was becoming stronger and stronger. In a way, the clasping part of the envelope became a mediator of uncertainty, as if she had to choose between opening it or leaving it as it was. A moment later, she threw it into her coat pocket and walked back home. I can't help but remember that time I was thinking, something is wrong. Week after week, things proceeded without a hitch at their place. The curtains were drawn shut, and the only change was Bethany, whose immaculate appearance was gone. At some point, she had given up my makeup and hair styling. I once saw her shopping and she was shaking badly. Chris, however, was untouched and looking even sparkling, if anything. He was totally laid back and carefree. Valentine's Day was coming in February, and the usual and early decorating came with it, which was Bethany and Chris's prerogative. Usual sparkling lights were their choice every year. A heart-shaped wreath on the door, and even a little display of candles on their porch. This time, however, their house was not the same. It was cold and empty. Afterwards, however, this too was something that had crossed my mind. It seemed that Bethany had become a frequent visitor at the pharmacy. I don't recall her explaining any health issues to me, though she did mention to me numerous times that she had something small to pick up from the store. Her face betrayed no emotion, through which I discovered that she was lost for words when I nonchalantly asked what she was going to buy. She said that these were vitamins headache pills. It was on Valentine's Day, not long after that, when the past was shown down the stream in such a most horrible tragedy. I quieted my television to listen to the arguing sounds from my next house in the night. I heard Bethany scream at Chris. While quite certain and irritable, she had a voice sounding angry. The dialogue coming from Chris was indiscernible, but Bethany's accusing him of being a liar was disconcertingly clear. The next moment, a door was slammed shut and silence took over. The following day was Valentine's Day. I threw a fleeting look into Bethany and Chris's living room. It seemed lovely. They had the table all set with white china, cutlery, a bouquet of flowers, and a mousse-like cake shaped in a heart. During the morning period, no one paid attention to the couple, but the situation had changed by noon when a police vehicle and an ambulance were at their home. It was a jiffy that the paramedics got inside. My mind was in a turmoil of anxiety about what had really gone on. The young man went into a coma before they brought him to the closest medical center. Thus, after a few minutes, there were rumors among people trying to find out what was going on. In the doorway, a strapping woman with an anguished expression gave her arms the church service cross. She was there, watching Chris being carried on a trolley by medics. He was still, his face white and deathly. Neither did Bethany shed tears, nor screamed. Instead, she stood there, watching him silently. 1 hour later, Chris passed away at the hospital. Initially, it was presumed to be either a sudden heart attack or food poisoning. Later, when an initial analysis revealed unexpected elements in his blood, some remarkable connections were brought to the light. The police couldn't control the situation. Privately led Bethany to surrender to the crime. She had put poison into the last piece of cake, which Chris had eaten 2 helpings of. That same morning, before he had the severe cramps and the shortness of breath, a few days ago, she had purchased the venom with a plan to mix it meticulously into the mixture. This was the final stage of her plot that she had planned for days. During the police interrogation, Bethany did not deny anything. She stated, "I wanted him to know how it felt." She managed to keep a steady tone throughout the interrogation. The trial moved along rather quickly, with enough evidence like an internet browser history, drugstore bills, and people or residents sleeping around listening their fight. The jury did not take their time to think before they sentenced Bethany to a lifelong imprisonment without an opportunity to be paroled. The dwelling is in a vacant state now. The parties are out of the question. No more bicycle rides. The windows have fake privacy, and there are weeds over enough the front lawn. Sometimes I assume my sister Bethian would be the one watering the flowers, and Chris would be the one who carried bags of groceries. Their Valentine's Day absence really reminds me of how we spent our morning at home. The walls were decorated, and there was a heart-shaped cake on the breakfast table, giving it the perfect atmosphere. It became the mushrooming of a ruined marriage. I had only a friendly acquaintance with Zach in the student club. He helped on the projects. I got the notes from him, and he made it easy for me to join conversations. But I began to view him with a different eye when he asked me for a date. He took me aback by my only perceiving him as a friend. Though frequently, being single, I considered dating him an unthought of event. So I kindly rejected him. He was fine with that, and I felt great relief. I thought I had nailed the closure of the matter, and it was curtains on that part. However, in the next 2 days, Zach launched the same operations. He came to the club and handed me the notes. I presumed my move had killed the issue. Out of the blue, I was taken aback by a surging email box which had the messages saying in it, "How was your club?" Initially, Tihei were light-hearted discussion, moments of club life and random links. After only a few replies, almost immediately, I started to churn the distance. At first, he was a friend I could chat with. If I didn't reply, he would want to know why. Then he started to show up really often. Initially, I was aware of the condition of the pact that I was doing everything in the name of, so much that he became a bit irritating later. Nowadays, I would always notice his shadow at the far end of the quad. One time I was sitting at Jamin's coffee house, and without thinking, I turned around the corner, alas, to be greeted by him waiting for me. I vaguely recall it, but I felt somewhere, and not very funny. I just couldn't bring myself to laugh this time. I was once more shrunk in a bag of vexation, and thus I failed to respond to messages he sent me. With that time called a friend, I was almost sorry about it. One moment, there came a text from him, a text in which I was also an "I am treated unfairly" kind of person. He is blacklisted now. I should have called someone, but I was just scared that his feelings were hurt. Outside my dorm late at night, I was terrified. I dashed inside and locked the door behind me. I hardly slept. The next day, campus security met me. They listened to me, their heads in disbelief, but there wasn't much a police officer could do in such cases. Their only suggestion was to maintain enough distance. I tried that too, to the cops just. First thing in the morning, I went to the cell phone operator and had my phone number reissued. The same was true of contacting him. Their prediction was that people would typically resolve issues with time. I wish all of that were really fact. I wanted him to go on. On the day of Love Day, I was studying in the library. According to my phone, Zach, unnoticed by me, sent him messages. Having issued them, he said, "You cannot run away from them forever. I know where you are. You should have met. Just said yes." A shiver ran up my spine. I hurried out of the library and across campus. The road was dim and deserted. The only sound was the wind blowing cold. As I moved forward to my dorm, I could hear footsteps behind me. I believed it was just another student. Yet my speed increased, as did Zach's. He approached the next street lamp, appearing to display a menacing demeanor. He accused me of lying and bringing his plight. In response, I sprinted away. Zach was a character in the play about my assault. He was always behind bars awaiting trial. The evidence of his guilt is irrefutable. I am still in pain from my injuries. My nerves were destroyed. In turn, I feel unsafe. I even lock my doors with 3 clicks during the day. Even during the day, I will lock my doors 3 times. The moment I feel someone is coming close, I feel jumpy. Navigating the way home at night upsets me. Valentine's Day reminds me of great sorrows. That knife cut through bright lights and pain was my friend. If only I had done something sooner or responded effectively. My mind gripped me. If someone is watching or following you, leave instantly. When I first walked into this room, it felt perfect, cozy, and soft in every way. The staff was incredibly cordial. The view of the outside world was magnificent. It was a romantic getaway on Valentine's Day. Just Tom and I. We had planned for some rest and relaxation blissfully. The quiet days were perfect. When we were in bed, we romanticized over the dim lighting of the room. Hours later, had dinner delivered, and finally opened a bottle of wine that was wonderful with all the things we had. As we watched the television, Tom all of a sudden jumped up and asked, "What is that?" with this point at something. I turned quickly and was stunned to see a flickering red light on the shelf above the television. I could barely see it at all. Was it part of the reflection of the television? I thought. But we didn't have anything on that shelf. Together with Tom, we approached the device. His strong observations were what led him to determine it was a camera. As he inspected it, I became more and more astonished. Yet he went on to carefully reposition a frilly fake flower away from the camera, hidden between the flower and the vase. It was something black the size of a fingertip, camouflaged cleverly onto a hidden item, and tiny wires were leading up to a hole in the back of the shelf, which really sickened me. Meanwhile, I could feel my stomach twisting there. A facility was built to spy on visitors, but it was, in fact, directed toward us. My companion Tom switched on his mobile phone flashlight and pointed it at the camera. The red light started to blink, then it switched off. I felt particularly uncomfortable. Someone was really monitoring us. I felt so unprotected. I meant to utter something, but only gestured to Tom to disconnect it. In answer to the request for the camera to be taken down I made, he moved with irritation, saying, "I can't. To remove it, we have to pull everything apart. And the installation would simply leave a hole in the wall, which isn't nice. I feel sick. How long has it been recording? We had stayed long enough in that room. Whoever did this must have captured all our activities." I picked up the phone and called the reception desk. I said in a sharp and urgent tone, "Is there a hidden camera in our room?" I insisted and requested that somebody be sent upstairs right away. There was a pause in the operator's reply, indicating a gradual realization of the problem. "Is the camera mounted on the shelf directed at the bed?" I added with annoyance. In a matter of minutes, a man dressed in a cowboy hat and hotel-branded jacket appeared. He neither showed any feelings of shock nor amusement. In our hotel room, we discovered a lodged camera. We inquired with the staff about it. The staff was oblivious to this. Tom called for assistance from the police. Staff were not authorized to capture us on tape. The police took action. They removed hidden wires attached to the camera. The male officer examined plant-like cameras for secret surveillance. The female officer talked to both Tom and me. I was frightened. Tom was angry. The hotel was uncomfortable. The workers act as if nothing happened. The police said that I was angry. Tom and I were waiting with the police. The police were telling us yes, they were being told by a person from the hotel, and therefore it was a private property. Tom said that it just did not seem to be the right thing. We would stay at the hotel again. I asked what was going on with my camera. There was some talk about whether this thing was plugged poorly, and Tom said he thought it had been set up on purpose. Hall agreed and called over the manager who was at the door. Could you explain this? The guy who came next was probably the supervisor. He shook his head immediately. We do not install cameras in guest rooms. We value their privacy. Thus Hall turned to Tom and me. We must go outside to verify. It can be wired. There should be a receiver nearby. I had no problem exiting the room. Tom and I went down the gray corridor. Hall wrote our statement of events. I could hear someone unscrewing something in the room. It made me feel ill. Others heard it too. Hall was done, so some policemen came and let us out. Reynolds was following, holding what looked like a live camera with a little receiver. There was some talk about whether this thing was loose, and Tom said he thought it had been put up intentionally. Hall agreed and called over the manager who was standing at the door. Could you explain this? The guy who came next was probably the supervisor. He shook his head straight away. We don't install cameras in guests' rooms. We respect their privacy. So Hall turned to Tom and me. We need to go outside to check. It might be wired. There should be a receiver not far away. I had no problem leaving the room. Tom and I went out down the gray corridor. Hall took down our account of what happened. I could hear something being unscrewed in the room. It made me feel sick. Others heard it too. When Hall was done, some cops came and drove us out. Reynolds followed, holding what looked like a live camera plus little receiver. Streaming, he said his face. Grim, it was feeding directly to an external source. The young man visibly groaned at this news. His agony of expression was now turned to the man. However, as a natural thing of nature, the two of them were no longer in the chat together. The next thing they told the couple is that there is no evidence of cameras in the hotel room, that they only want to respect the privacy of our guest. Reynolds informed everyone that whoever puts hotel video cameras in private rooms should be fired and never be allowed to work here again. All of a sudden, I heard a sound coming from a room, and I could hear it from a distance. Oh my God, how scary is it? There was somebody on the other line. I could hear the other person saying who did it in the room I was in all the time. A red-eye camera watched everything during the stream of Hall. Gritting my teeth, I swore a bit as I looked at the rage in the face of Reynolds, who turned back to the manager. The second too long is still on. So first he nodded to me, then followed me. It was in the lobby that the officers vanished into the back room. The hotel staff kept whispering among themselves, stealing glances at us. Their stares were heavy, but I didn't mind. I didn't care. My mind was being swirled around by the thoughts of who had been watching us, and how long they had been doing this, and how many other guests had been recorded. Around 40 minutes later, Hall and Reynolds came out with even graver expressions than before. Reynolds was the first one to speak. The footage is limited. Not all files are present here, and it seems that someone has recently deleted some files. But what we found was enough to confirm that this camera has been active for weeks, maybe months. My stomach churned, and Hall said, "We believe this is part of an illegal streaming operation." The feed was being sent to a private server where it may have been viewed by multiple people. We've seen cases like this before. It's not easy to track down the source, but we'll do everything we can. Tom's fists clenched. But who set it up? Reynolds glanced back at the manager, who was now sweating. We don't know yet, but given that someone, there was no doubt that it had to be someone from the inside who leaked the video. I didn't have enough time to take a breath when I found out. I felt naked, as if somebody had been watching me in my most private moments. The scarier it was to think, the more terrifying it became. What if other people had seen us? I sought help from Hall. We made up our minds to report it and dive deeper into finding the truth. But I was candid with her about what was going on. If it was streamed live, it is possible that copies of it were already lurking around. Once anything went up on the internet, there was hardly a chance to eliminate it completely. The news overwhelmed me. All I wished for was to turn back the time, just to relive the moments of intimacy. When Tom touched me gently on my shoulder, my thoughts drifted to obtaining legal representation. In Hall's countenance, however, I could tell she was not aware of this strategy before. Going to see a different place was supposed to be another priority, it seemed. As we left the hotel, we were the ones who looked defeated, without our heads up. Although the place used to be the best in the world, it just became dangerous. I could not believe that I had to choose between these two places. Tom was the one who noticed a message from a sender with no name, and the subject line was also left blank. The peculiar thing was that this message was not really a letter because it had only one link inside it. I stood behind him where he sat at the computer. We kept silent until he activated that dreadful link. The site was set up like any other adult video provider site, yet the description was something freaky. The phrase "new couple at hotel name full room feed" made me feel goosebumps all over. Our picture was lying just below it. Praying with fear, I was touching for the button to turn it off. That time he mentioned the police again made me go all red. We went to talk to the police, but they told us those who got the video could create problems. And even if it was deleted, it would be a while before it did lead to the services to crack down on it. No help ever comes from the police, even if the police always said, "Please, let it happen again. We will help you." Whenever something gets uploaded to the internet, it stays there forever. I cannot help but keep thinking about it. I do not socialize as I used to. I feel like everyone I pass is looking at me, waiting to video me. I crave justice, but I know that it won't be achieved. The best thing one could do with it is to caution other people by disclosing the presence of the camera. It could malfunction at times, you know. Technology is hard these days. I really do not have an idea. I went to the shops on Valentine's Day to buy Rachel something. I had a special dinner planned. And then I bumped into a letterbox that was empty rather than a wrecked one. It instances of a wrecked box preceding it. Then I found unidentified notes inside. They were scrawled with my name misspelled. I initially believed they were junk emails, but eventually I realized that the messages had Mother's short notes threatening me. "Do not allow her to get away from you. You will later wish it would happen enough." I was initially baffled. I wanted to know the person who sent me the letters. A wave of fear made me shudder down. I collected them inside, sat down at the table, and went through them once more. The handwriting was unsteady, and there was no name, but it was apparent that the one behind it was there just to intimidate me. They wished me to leave her. I could not stand by and do nothing. My home was my next destination. Upon arrival, each of my subsequent moves was simply an implementation of my plan. I wore my warm clothing for the journey, and lastly, I gave her the letters. She skimmed through step 1, getting increasingly tense with each line, and after she finished it said, "It must be him." "Who?" I asked, already knowing. "It's my ex-boyfriend," she replied. As I pointed out, he had issues of jealousy and could not give her full control. The sender has been a former associate who claimed the recipient is the cause of his dire situation in the past. When he was blocked by Rachel, he had stopped. She said he might have been mistaken, shaking her head. I had the confidence that he would be the one who does this, but I was wrong. I immediately reported it to the police 1 hour later. The police officer named Mike showed up, a man with a lot of experience. After looking at the letters, he said they were not direct threats to harm you. It may be irritating, but unless he specifically says that he is going to kill you, it is not a crime. Rachel and I always kept the letters from the strange man that proved to be threatening. We stayed cool-headed and had dinner out, brought in a pizza while Rachel was cooking a salad at home. The frozen air of February in Chicago. Skating over the icy pavement were the streetlights casting orange shadows. While I was at the pizza shop, I observed an SUV across the street with the engine running. It prompted me to be on the lookout. As I went to the street, the SUV's lights were on. I was just beside a car when I was pushed against it. With a second, I was shocked. Some person from behind was holding me by my jacket, due to which I dropped my keys on the ground. The arm was strong and smart. My red eyes looked down at me, heavily breathless. It was Rachel's ex. He started by giving me a tight punch in the stomach. My back hit the brick wall next. I gasped like a fish. Pain coursed in my ribs while I tried to see him clearly. Mad, dangerous, he was. It was not apparent whether he was finished. He was getting me furious as well. My whole body was straining with adrenaline. In the case of Rachel's ex, he was the one pulling the strings. The fact that he was going to hit me was apparent, even before he pulled his arm back like a powerful wind battering me. I could barely stand on my crumbling knees. My body twisted badly. I was in a low position while trying to get up from the ground. The next thing I knew, I was up again somehow. He took off my shirt. I lost my balance and dropped to the ground. The asphalt was coarse and scratched my skin like a cheese grater. The shock of the situation gave me a gut-wrenching reaction. I was overcome with fear, and my instinct was to flee the place immediately. I kneeled down on the ground and looked up at the leader. Just then, I received a rude slap on my face. I defended myself. I swung my fists hard. Then we switched over to wrestling, until I punched him once again. I got injured as he hurled me. He stuck the bandage on it and administered the drug. The pill was the last thing I managed to swallow. My guts had become so cramped when he applied pressure on my stomach that I couldn't breathe. Both Harold and I became serene. I had a feeling that I still had a game with Rachel and Mark after the fact. The world was overtaken by darkness. There were no people on the street. I became nervous as the silhouettes of the houses and trees surrounded me. I was lost as I couldn't see a thing. I had shaky legs. I tried to suppress my tears, but the tears of my heart came out. When I saw the destination of our bus, I was sure that my time on Earth was limited to only 2 hours. I was feeling bad and out of breath. I was struck with anguish in the chest. I opened my pocket searching for the lost one, but I had nothing. Had I misplaced it by chance during the fight? I gently searched my pocket. The only thing that felt solid was a crowbar. I took it out. To my surprise, the back door of the car opened. I felt like 1,000 needles were stabbing at me because of the cold air that was flowing. I was in a daze. The SUV was crawling at a snail's pace. The street lights were flashing so fast that it became obscured to the eye. In a reflex, I sprang out of the trunk. I reached the ground heavily. My shoulder and my back were cut by so much pain. The back of my head was identified as the point where I got hit hard. My eyes had darkness and sparkle. In one way or another, I took the courage to be standing up, but it was shaky. At that moment, the whine of the tires of the SUV was heard. Like a shot, the door was opened and I was off sprinting with panic. The gas station ahead brightened up the dark sky. I ran to it. My heart was beating loud in my ears over the noise of his footsteps. Behind me, a sudden pang in my lower back crippled me. I seemed to be as broken as my legs, and I sat on the floor. I saw him stand over me, a crowbar in hand. He bore such an expression of both anger and glee. I was frozen. The only thing he bent down and said, "I told you to." There were footsteps, though he heard a voice of someone who shouted of someone having spotted him. He looked up, then down at me for a moment. I thought he was going to kill me, but he turned and fled. I don't remember anything later. Some people came and someone called 911. Then I was out of it. In the hospital. The doctors told me that both of my kneecaps were damaged beyond repair operations, and rehabilitation could not restore my walking ability. They said I would not be able to walk without help. The first person I saw when I awoke was Rachel. She was crying, blaming herself for things that were not true if there was a deal that could not be cut. Victims represent their cases in court. It is a lengthy process. The police arrested him 2 days later when he was about to leave town. Now he is in jail for assault, kidnapping, attempted murder. He would be there for many years to come, no matter what happened. Then I was once only a common man, but now because I neglected the threats told to me, I am in a wheelchair. Do not ignore threats. Some people mean what they say. I had a plan to propose to Alice. I left flowers for her. I was there to watch what happened next. Improved content, further enhanced quality of content, following the guidelines given very thoroughly, with a strong stress on all content goals, retaining the original content structure and HTML elements. As I approached the gas station, it gave me a bright light that pierced the darkness. I ran like I was being chased by a vampire, and my heart was pounding so loudly above the sound of his footsteps behind me that I could hear it. Suddenly, a horrible pain rushed through my lower back, and my legs went almost completely numb as I got to the ground. I was looking up at him from the ground, a crowbar in hand. He looked both happy and furious. I could not move out of fear. He squatted down and said, "I told you to." The footsteps of a voice that belonged to someone who had spied him hit my ears. His eyes went up and down me. For a moment, I believed he would kill me, but he shifted for the exit, and I was so unaware that I couldn't even tell it was him that did it. I can tell you that I was the last one to see him, because I will not be able to convince anybody that he did not do it. I don't remember much after that. People stopped at and called 911, and I was out like a light in the hospital. Doctors stated that both of my kneecaps got the best of me. because after surgeries and rehab, my ambulatory capacity could not be repaired. They said I needed the crutches to walk. The first person I saw when I woke up was Rachel. She was crying, lamenting the uncertain events of blame that she was the one guilty of. If there was a deal that could not be cut, victims represent their cases in court. It is a lengthy process. On the second day of police arresting him, he was running to the airport. Although he was about to flee the town, hopefully the police would stop him. The one thing that has been assured, however, is that I am the one who cannot move if I do not mention the threats I was given. Was it a normal thing? Now I was a normal human being now, because I was the one who did not believe the threats I could not stretch in my legs. Never, ever ignore threats. Some people mean what they are saying. I was going to propose to Alice. I left flowers for her. I then wanted to see what happened next. Someone took the flowers. He rushed to Alice's door. It was strange. I felt something was off. I followed him. He entered an apartment. I listened at the door. Odd noises inside. I called Alice. Alice, don't go outside. A guy just took my flowers for you and went inside downstairs. That's my neighbor, she said lowly, acting as a stalk. I phoned the police, but when I skipped to the door outside, there was a fast man staring at my phone. He didn't like being caught. The man was holding my bouquet tightly. Hey man, just give me back my flowers, I said again. Looking down, I couldn't think of words. Quick, he released the bouquet and also reached for his jacket. I saw a knife flashed suddenly. There was no time to react. Ah! I screamed in pain as the knife tore into my arm. We crashed against the wall. The table tipped over. He tried swinging at me again, but this time I had a stabbing pain in my side. Then my legs went weak. I dropped down on the floor and pressed my hand on my stomach. It was wet and warm, and the assailant ran away with the jewelry. I cannot call out any longer. I dialed 911. Screaming, I hurried, saying I was cut. My head was spinning. I was weak in my feet, so I fell. I felt blood on my hand. I saw him run away, who was supposed to give me flowers. After some time, I heard Alice calling my name. Then I heard the sirens too. In the hospital, I saw how bright the lights were. There were hands that were trying to stop the bleeding. I had lost this much blood that they had to give me blood. The blade missed vital organs. The doctor said if the ambulance had taken more time, I would have died. The police arrested him 3 times afterward. 5 days later, I was surprised that my apartment had become a repository for stolen items. I was struck by the abundance of stolen items, wallets and jewels among others, plus the keys to the other rooms. The very people I had watched and studied when they were away had become the criminals. What if I had not met them in that passage? They could have continued this work tritely. This Valentine was a day that I would not forget, because despite being a bad thing, I had such a dearest friend, Alice, by my side. I had to kneel on the hospital ground finally when I got strong enough to stand up. My wish has only been to open a cafe, since I have also been craving to be a taxi driver for quite a long time. I wanted to tell Emma, my longtime friend, my love for her on that Valentine Day. Over the years, we had bumbled together, and I had set my mind on one day being brave enough to let her know the way I felt. It was the day I was hoping for. I took her out for dining after getting her from my job. My so-called shift was dull. The same routine of tired workers and latecomers, coupled with couples having their dates saw to it that it remained boring. A guy who looked nervous took his ride. I bent down as he said I need him to wipe those tears. I couldn't help but do that. I allowed the person into my car. His anxiousness was written on his face. He kept looking around. At that moment, suddenly, he pointed a gun at my arm. "Steady," he ordered. Police were nearby. The accelerator had to be pressed as fast as I could since my heart was racing. The gun was still pointing at me. There was no choice but to remain calm. "And don't stop," he insisted. I nodded. The lights were blinking. However, they did not follow us. I was thinking too fast. There seemed to be no way out. He cried, "Help, I'm dead." I took a quick look back. On that night so nice and cool, I did not expect any trouble. I was on my way to Emma, and I envisioned a lot of wrong things. The street became alive and active, but it was more like a dream of terror. I pushed on the door lightly to collect the last bits of the excitement. Emma called me on the cell phone. I stomped the gas pedal and the car raced across the red streets. My body felt pickled with worry over my painful gunshot wound. Blood squirted thickly through my fingers as I drove. I had to reach the hospital fast. "Hey man, you better help me out. I can stop. Pull over." I just keep trying to stay calm. In my back, the gun was pushing its way deeper, causing sickness. I had only 10 minutes to pick up Emma. Emma was at home, being unaware of how the storm was on our doorstep. My hands were trembling as I hid that street. From where I was to get my girl was standing outside, munching some popcorn, sleeves of her coat hiding her hands. When she saw my car, she hesitated to enter. Emma stepped closer. I'm alarmed when the guy behind whispered something. She gasped. I slowed down. The voice of people echoed, followed by a gunshot. I trembled as I watched her stumble, fall, and reach for me. I shifted the dark, spidery hands striving inside. The untidy can ruin everything. That night is still vivid in my memory. The accident occurred on Emma's block. The person who was behind me screamed, and it was his blood after he got out of the car. I felt dejected amidst the tension on the street. My friends turned and were packed in my car as I was going from drama to panic. I noticed Emma was bleeding a lot. People shouted, "Help!" I creased Emma's true nature instead of the noise. My knees gave way. I pleaded with her, "Do not leave me, please," as tears streamed down my cheeks. Wailing sirens echoed somewhere afar as the man was taken captive. But my attention was still not shifted from Emma. I pressed on her injury like an open wound, for I was crying. I couldn't leave her, and I was hoping to stand beside her. Although we had spoken about moving in together as a couple and I was feeling good about it, he was no longer the one I knew. He kept his dark secrets. I thought he was having an affair. I promised myself to get the evidences the next time he would take a shower. He had left his phone on the nightstand again. My heart was thumping as I took a look at his phone. No password. I had a look at his messages. Many of them were flirtatious chats with women. My stomach was churning, but there was worse stuff. The first one was a photo of men who were dead and bloodied. All of them were fresh. The messages were horrifying. They had phrases such as "clean finish, no return," "send payment." My fingers were shaking as I scrolled down. My knees gave way. The shower stopped. I swiftly locked the phone on. Jason came out through the bathroom door, a towel on his head. He looked at me in a stunned way that made me feel through that it was pale. Normal was the voice. "Maid." "Nothing." I forced it out. He was a bit exhausted. While he was walking to the table where he kept his phone, I stared at him as he looked at the screen very pointedly, and then he came back to me and said, "Give it to me, I must." I shook my head. I tried to act like I did not do anything. His jaw was stiff as he walked closer to me and grasped my wrist. I abruptly stood up and said no lies. He asked me what was I talking about. The grip on my hand was his only reason for pain. He showed me the unlocked phone with an open chat. Initially, he appeared to be calm, but then he grasped my hand firmly. He became irritated. I shouldn't have shown it. Jason released me. Later on, hit me on my face. The powerful impact took me to the bed's frame. I felt a sudden transaction of energy. I was in excruciatingly difficult and embarrassing circumstances, primarily because he was torturing me by pulling my hair. He promptly demanded what I was visualized. I was a basket of tears. However, I had to harden up my voice, commanding, "Leave me to my peace." He yelled the second time, "What do you want to do?" I took a deep breath and said, "No one," in a low voice. Again, he slapped me with more force this time. I felt my eyes getting foggy and my ears buzzing. I wanted to escape, but instead of liberating me from hair clutches, he pushed me to the ground. I heard cracking either from the wrist or arm. Oh, the pain was like hell. It was a pain I couldn't even faintly imagine, and it felt so heavy to bear. Barely I managed to inhale. Jason came over me. He breathed at a rate faster than a jet fighter. His twisted face was boiling with fury. Beneath that, however, there was hidden agony. He knew he was on the dark side. I implored. I'd be miserable. I was completely ignored. He just went dull. He muttered and tore his hair. "This is your fault," he snarled. "You were too close to someone that you like." I got down from the car. He was all over the place. If I loitered a bit longer, I would be a corpse. His phone rang and Jason answered it. I used the opportunity of great news. I ducked inside the open door and locked myself into the hall. My arm didn't even hurt. I sped down the stairs. I climbed the stairs, flying below my heels. Jason slammed furniture and opened doors behind me, staying right behind me. I swung and opened my front door, and the most severe blow of a cold wind blew upon me. "Help!" I yelled. A neighbor switched on his porch light. A dog yapped. Jason was on my tails, and his steps were like a thunderstorm in virulent power. Voices reverberated, doors opened, crowds came out. I was holding tight my broken arm. Jason was static in his position. His chest was full of air. His eyes were agitated. For the first time, I noticed genuine terror in his pupils. There were too many people around who could see him. There was no way he could do anything now. Somebody had already contacted the police. At last, I felt safe. I sank down on the sidewalk. I found it hard to breathe. Jason had disappeared by the time the police arrived. Currently, I am in a hospital bed, with a cast on my arm and bruises all over my face. He is on the run. Despite it, I feel grateful that I am alive. It was a couple of years ago when I met Becky. I was friends with Sam since our childhood. He was the person I relied on totally. I took Valentine's Day as the ideal chance to reveal my loving feelings to her. I exercised my searching skills and found the one I wanted. It was expensive, but the expense was nothing, considering how much she was worth. Sam was the one who went the extra mile to get the ring for me. He joked that I would use my money to ring myself eventually. He was really happy for me, but later he asked me for some aid with money. I thought I didn't have any too. Almost all of my money had been spent on the ring for Becky. Sam looked like he was near a thunderstorm. Then his behavior changed suddenly. He began ignoring my messages and avoiding my eye contact. On the third day preceding Valentine's Day, I received a call from the jeweler, who informed me that the ring was available for collecting. I reached out to Sam to come and see it. He was astonished by its beauty beyond words. I presented it to him out of the box while he was staring at it. Then I said, "It is very cool." My cell rang while I left the room. I walked and saw Sam walking into the kitchen. He came to ask me about the weekend dinner plans, which we discussed for about 2 minutes. When I returned, there wasn't a single person in the living room. A little coffee was left on the table. Sam was not there anymore. I was enchanted for a while by the bewildering realization. Even if the front door was closed, there was no sound of it closing. My next action was to look through the window. I would not be able to deny the fact that my anxiety was getting on my nerves. This time, I saw no one. The road was empty. I made an effort to call him, but each time I was cut off by voicemail. I lost my hopes for him answering the phone again when night fell and I called him. I searched the address of his home using his phone number, as I had strong intuition. Therefore, I started to contact our common friends. Most of them said they hadn't seen him for days. Marcus was obvious about being confused, and he hesitated. Then he opened up that Sam was meeting someone in a basement on the east side. I wanted to hear more about it. However, I held back. Instead, I took my car keys and left. The drives felt like they went on forever without a stop. I was holding the steering wheel gently, as if it was frozen. Sam Bikpa took my ring from me. He was caught by me in the act. As he was running away, I caught him. There was no one on the road. Old buildings were in an abandoned state. An unpleasant odor was in that small basement. I was aware of this beforehand. Sam was with his friend at the table. The guy was holding the ring. I demanded Sam just to pass it on. He was surprised. "Get out," was the warning from Sam. My eyes were only on him. My ring was hid in the pocket of his friend. In a dark basement with an old bulb, I pinned Sam down. He had an additional person along. There were 2 things in their hands. The one holding it was Sam. I was not the only one with nothing in hand. It was the one that had the glimmer and the light. After that, the dialogue was just calmness with Sam. He was very much shocked. It was in a small voice that he warned that I should not be there. I walked towards Sam with full force. On the other side of the room, my ring was hidden in Sam's friend's pocket, among the others. The man was of no importance to me at that moment. I was. "Sam, do you have my ring?" "I want to sort this out," he told Sam. "I can't get involved," he said and walked away. His footsteps echoed on the stairs, and now it was just we two. I took another step forward. No. I had no choice at all, man. I had to do it. I know I have to take it back. My voice trembled. You stole from me. I needed the money. I jumped and we both fell hard on the table. In the process of falling, the piles of papers and a half-empty beer bottle flew off. Sam then pushed me back, but I was stronger than ever. I pinned him against the wall with my forearm pressed hard on his throat. You do not do this to a friend, I growled. I felt his hand move before I could see it. There was a flash of silver, a sharp burning pain in my stomach. I stumbled back. My hands instinctively went straight to the wound. Warm blood soaked through my shirt. Sam stood there, breathing hard, still holding the knife. His face had turned pale. His hands were shaking. I didn't mean... My knees hit the ground. Everything around me became blurry, and I went to the side. The sounds of people coming my way were in my hearing. My last recollection was of a person yelling for help and everything going black. I woke up in a hospital that night where the ceiling shone incessantly. Feeling my heavy leaden body sinking into the bed, I remembered I was dying. My stomach hurt badly, and I could hardly breathe. The machines beside me were beeping with weird sounds. I'm still alive today solely because Sam was arrested. The guy he had sold the ring to became scared of the cops after hearing the tussle. They discovered me lying on the basement floor with heavy blood loss. I was doomed. I was lucky. They could have found me bleeding out even in a minute or two. What is not to be forgotten is that the police almost managed to get back the ring, which I had thought was lost. Unfortunately, it seemed new, not the old one. I saw Becky. She sat beside me on my bed, putting her hands together on the lap. She was staring at me like a stranger. I can't do this, she whispered. I nodded in understanding. She was gone a week later. After this incident, I took 6 months before I was able to heal completely, or rather completely physically recovered. Even though the mark on my stomach disappeared, the tear in my soul wasn't even by now. I trusted Sam so much that I would have never expected him to betray me, and it was not even our first fight, so I could just forgive him. I didn't want to see him ever. The ring has been in the drawer for a long period of time. However, I couldn't remove it from my possession since my heartache had not passed yet. Only when we were helping each other with life necessities, we were real close buddies. However, we had a lot of time spent chatting, plotting, and switching pics, even though we hadn't seen each other yet. There was a rhythm, I said. Seeing each other the first time was so easy and natural. We were like what we knew each other for a long time. As the month was winding down, I got the guts to ask her if we could meet one night. Her name was Madison, who lived alone. She requested me to go over for a quiet evening. She said she would like to have an intimate night at her house instead of going out. I liked that idea, which appeared to be very romantic rather than false. I was taking my time in the bathroom to make myself look presentable before the date. I bought flowers and chocolates, which I thought showed thought